Hi, and welcome to Exploring the Intersections of Environmental Justice and Equitable Development and Infrastructure Investments. My name is Renee Mazurek, and I'm River Network's Resilient Communities Manager.
I'm joined today by several of my River Network and Groundwork USA colleagues, as well as members of the Urban Waters Learning Network Collaborative, which we'll talk about more in a few moments. So we do have a lot to cover today. I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. So who is the Urban Waters Learning Network? We are a national peer-to-peer network of urban waters practitioners, co-led by River Network and Groundwork USA and funded by EPA's Office of Water. We offer training, resources, tools, and funding to network members and Urban Waters Federal Partnership locations, which is what brings us here today. If you're not already a member of the Urban Waters Learning Network, you can join us on our online Mobilize platform, where we communicate, share resources, and continue conversations such as these that we're having today. And I think that link will be shared in the chat. I'm going to pass it over to one of our collaborative members, Gloria McNair, to tell you a little bit more about the collaborative. Gloria, it's good to see you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to be here. I'm Gloria McNair. I'm with Groundwork Jacksonville, the manager of community engagement and equity, and my pronouns are she, her. In 2020, the Urban Waters Learning Network formed the Equitable Development and Anti-Displacement Collaborative to further the work around the topics of gentrification and displacement. The intentions were to convene a community of experts to listen, learn, and grow the body of research pertaining to equitable development, resulting in additional resources for urban waters practitioners on the topics of gentrification, displacement, anti-displacement strategies, and community engagement. I've been a member of the collaborative since 2021. It has been some of the most rewarding work of my career, working with some wonderful professionals. The collaborative provided a panel presentation and discussion at River Rally 2022. Feedback from attendees included an interest in learning more about federal and state environmental justice policies affecting our urban communities. Today's webinar is the result of our network partners' interests and concerns, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Gloria. Yeah, you see on this slide that we usually meet in this virtual format like we're meeting in today, but we did get to meet in person at River Rally, so that was really great. I am not going to touch too deeply on the intersections of environmental justice and equitable development because my colleague Erin Kanzig and I did record a video about this that provided a lot of background information. And so if you haven't had a chance to watch that, you can go ahead and watch that after this session. But basically, we're here today because there's a lot of interest in how infrastructure dollars are going to be distributed equitably, and in part through the Justice 40 programs. And also, we're here to elevate community concerns about displacement that can be caused by new development in these communities. So before I hand it over to our expert panelists, I have a couple of questions to get us started. This is it's called Easy Retro. It's a retrospective board where you can share with us your questions, comments, experiences with green gentrification and displacement in your own communities. And you can also add things to this board throughout the session as they come to mind and through the conversations that we're having. We'd love to hear from you on this topic. I am going to move us along and introduce you to our panel. So it is my pleasure to introduce you to the three panelists that we have joining us today. We've got Cheyenne Holiday from Oregon. She's the Water Justice Coordinator for Verde. We have Sonia Kakari. They are the National Director of Policy and Civic Engagement for the Emerald Cities Collaborative, joining from Pennsylvania. and Lubna Ahmed, the Environmental Justice Board's manager, joining from Colorado's Department of Public Health and the Environment. To read more about these panelists and get their more detailed bios, please visit our events page at the link provided in the chat. So before I turn it over to Cheyenne as our first speaker, we are going to launch a poll to get a little bit more information from you about community relationships, or what is your relationship with the community. So Erin, can you launch the poll? There it is. Thank you all so much. There's answers coming in. We've got more than half of you. Thank you so much. Terrific. So Erin, let's give it just another 20 seconds maybe. Okay, and let's go ahead. We're going to end the poll. It looks like there are a lot of local, state, and federal agencies on the call today. So welcome. Thanks for joining us. And others, so that's 63%. We've got 21% nonprofits engaging with community leaders, and 19% we're trying to build capacity within the community. All right, with that, Cheyenne, I'm going to stop my share and hand it over to you.
Perfect. I'm just pulling up my slide. Show. Can you see my slides? Perfect. Okay. So hello, my name is Cheyenne Holiday. I'm going to talk about community engagement and some of the work that Verde does, as well as our collaboration with the Oregon Water Futures Collaborative. So here's another intro of me. My name is Cheyenne Holiday. I'm based in Oregon. So I work at Verde, and at Verde, we serve communities by building environmental wealth through social enterprise, outreach, and advocacy. We're based in Portland, Oregon, although our environmental justice work is statewide. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our infrastructure projects, our leadership trainings, and community building. We invest in people and community by offering leadership trainings to build environmental leaders. We work in the Coley neighborhood in Portland, Oregon, which is a predominantly Latinx community. So for an example of an infrastructure project where we engage community members is the Coley Park. So the Coley neighborhood is disproportionately low income and people of color, and they suffer from a poor environment, including toxic air quality due to its location near a glass plant. And 26% of the residents live in property, 51% of them are people of color, and 9 out of 10 students receive free or reduced lunch. Before we were working in this area, it lacked places to play and experience nature. So using our contracting program called Verde Builds, we were able to create a program that recruits and trains members of the community to connect low-income people of color in the neighborhood to green jobs in the economy. We also invested in long-term career development. We partnered with the Habitat for Humanity of Portland, Hacienda CDC, and the Native American Youth and Family Center. And this park I go and have lunch often, and it really has become a catalyst for what the neighborhood improvement could look like and a symbol of what the Coley neighborhood can be. Also, most recently, we have officially created a Coley TIF district. I think that this was official in mid-November, November 16th. But 7 community-based organizations, including Verde, have created a community-driven development district that makes investments to ensure that Coley is a place for Black, Indigenous, and tribal people of color, and low-income people who are vulnerable to displacement, that they will have a stable neighborhood with affordable homes and economic prosperity for not only now, but generations to come. So like I said, November 16th, City Council approved this TIF district, and it will go into effect in July of 2023 and will exist for the next 30 years. Over time, a committee of neighborhood members will work with Prosper Portland and the Portland Housing Bureau to co-create investment properties for over $300 million. These funds are going to go towards stabilizing the people and businesses in Coley most vulnerable to milestones. And after questions, I can go in a little bit to how it works. It's kind of wonky, so if you have questions, feel free to send me a private message about it. So Verde also works with the Oregon Water Futures Collaborative. The collaborative includes Verde, the Coalitions of Communities of Color, the University of Oregon's Indigenous Race and Ethnic Studies Department, Oregon Environmental Council, and Willamette Partnership. We focus on water and leadership in Oregon for low-income, rural communities of color and Indigenous communities. In 2022, we had a project at the intersection of water and environmental justice interests, and through our work, we aim to impact how the future of Oregon's water is imagined using storytelling, capacity building, relationship building, policy making, and really centering community in the advocacy. So in 2020, we created a project where we lifted up voices across the state, identified community priorities with a focus on culturally specific resiliency. We built capacity around water advocacy and fostered a statewide water justice movement. So we had 2 online gatherings, 75 phone interviews with a total of 104 participants. And these engagements were multilingual, sometimes having sessions, online gatherings with 5 languages happening at once. I will say each engagement was completely different. And we worked with the communities to co-lead these facilitations and make sure that there was benefits from both sides. And then what we were able to do with what we heard, we released a report, and the report sparked momentum for a historic $530 million water investment package for the state of Oregon in 2021. It provides investments at the state, regional, and local levels. It includes a massive investment in drinking water, wastewater, and groundwater infrastructure projects, while also providing one-time funding to increase water data, provide additional water planning support for communities, and expand a system to identify and address local and regional needs. This also included a $1.5 million for equitable water access and Indigenous energy resiliency. So since 2020, what have we been up to? We have been working and officially launched in November, the Oregon Water Justice Framework. This framework seeks to influence water policy by centering community voices as water actors and community assets in the state. We have built on our earlier engagements, and now we're up to over 200 engagements. And this framework really builds on the experience of community members across the state, as well as feedback from tribal governments, researchers, state agencies, and environmental organizations. We had a similar model. We just talked to individuals, use storytelling to really find out what Oregonians' priorities for water are. And here are the priorities: Indigenous water justice leadership, renters' rights, water access and affordability, natural and built infrastructure for clean water, emergency preparedness, and community empowerment. And so this was recently launched. We're hoping that it can be used for now, but also in the future as we continue to engage with Oregonians across the state. And so moving into what we're doing now and how we're building community members, helping to connect areas across the state towards water investments, is we have a Water Justice Leadership Institute launching in March of next year. It's going to raise awareness around water justice. It's going to develop community capacity to advocate for water justice and also identify project ideas. And so our vision for this is we're going to have 15 participants all across the state. We're going to build them up as community leaders, really dive into the questions that they have, and then hopefully we'll have identified projects in their communities that we can kind of help point funding opportunities to and help these community leaders get into the work in their area. And we're also diving into the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund and looking at those federal dollars and how these funds can really impact the communities that need them most. And I will stop there.
Thank you so much. We are going to have some time for questions, but we'll do that after all three of the panelists have spoken. We do have another poll to launch before we transition to Sonia, our second panelist. So Erin, could you launch that second poll? There we go. All right, so this has to do with engaging with government funding, as well as the changes that you want to see in your community related to infrastructure. And the categories in that second question come from the Justice 40 playbooks that the Emerald City Collaborative have created. Thank you so much for participating in the polls. Good, we are 30% there. Keep it open for about another 30 seconds. Good, just about halfway there. If you have a moment, go ahead and take the time to answer these questions. Good, and Erin, let's go ahead and close the poll. 57% of you have said yes, we are in the process of engaging with government funding. 21% were thinking about it and have done some research. 21% also said we'd like to, but we don't know where to start. And as for the second question, overwhelmingly 89% of you are looking for environmental and climate justice in your communities. 60% water justice, 51% economic justice, 38% transportation equity, and 34% energy justice. And they're 2% for other affordable housing. Yes, thank you so much. That is on our radar as well. All right, so Sonia, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you. You can go ahead and share your slides.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Sonia Kakari. My pronouns are they and she, and I am on Susquehannock land, which is occupied by Central Pennsylvania. I am here today from Emerald Cities Collaborative, which is a national nonprofit that was really founded to do intersectional work, economic justice, climate, environmental, and energy justice, and racial justice as well. We're a Black-led organization, and we have 4, or I guess 5 offices across the country, and are working to serve communities who are trying to engage in federal resources, but also just try to create a more accountable and just governance system as we transition into a green economy. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the Justice 40 initiative, because that's a framework that's, I guess, temporally relevant right now as we are still in the Biden-Harris administration. And this was done within the first couple weeks of Biden-Harris taking office in January 2021, stating that 40% of the overall benefits of certain federal investments need to flow towards disadvantaged communities. If anyone is feeling like that is super vague, I have no idea what that means, how is that going to be held accountable? You're asking the right questions, because it is, yes, incredibly vague, very difficult to keep accountable, and the definitions here are key. And as you can see, the federal investments really fall under stuff that y'all are interested in: affordable housing, energy efficiency, transportation, workforce and training development, water remediation, land remediation, and just development of infrastructure. And what we're trying to do at Emerald Cities is really use this as a leverage point to ensure investments in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act, are community governed, and that there are stronger community voice and centrality and resources as these resources get implemented. Because that's the only way, at least at Emerald Cities, we believe true community benefits can be realized. So I'm hoping that these slides will get out to y'all, because there are links in them for the Justice 40 interim implementation guidance. We have not seen final guidance yet, but we are expecting that to hopefully come out at the end of the year or beginning of next year. And it really goes over what benefits can look like. They can be both direct and indirect investments. And again, don't confuse investments with investments of financial dollars. They can also be investment of technical assistance, time, research. So they're really trying to do their best to be creative on how to hold government resources accountable to communities while still staying in line with statute and regulations that are legally enforceable. Some of the benefits listed in the interim implementation guidance include things like microgrids, climate resilience plans, jobs created, training opportunities, apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship opportunities. And again, it's really on a case-by-case basis which benefits get realized in which types of funding opportunities. So again, that accountability piece is really needing a little bit more strength. And I think the administration is trying to do the best they can in a very hard legal structure situation. But the other really important part is how you define disadvantaged communities. And that is actually defined differently depending on which program you are looking at. For the sake of Justice 40 and the resource that they are using when they talk about Justice 40 broadly is called the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool. And that's also linked here. They just came out with their 1.0 version. They had a beta version released last year. A lot of public comment went into it, and it has recently been updated to be a little bit stronger, but definitely could be better. But for things like state revolving funds, which have been mentioned and which we'll talk a little bit more about, those definitions for disadvantaged communities are actually defined at the state level. And in other cases, disadvantaged communities can be defined in statute that supersedes the screening tool. So again, not consistent, hard to keep accountable, and takes a lot of effort on the community's part to really understand, are they eligible for asking for these quote unquote benefits? So I wanted to dig into some IJA, which is the in Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and IRA, which is the Inflation Reduction Act, funding opportunities to be aware of. First and foremost, like I think we've talked about, is the Clean Water and Drinking Water State Revolving Funds that Cheyenne said that, you know, they're looking at in Oregon. And what's really special about this is that the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, mandated that actually 49% of the funding has to go directly to disadvantaged communities. Again, that definition is made at the state level, but that funding can go to water projects. And SRFs are kind of opaque, in my opinion, and a little bit complicated. You're speaking to someone who is a novice in looking at state revolving funds, or also known as SRFs. And it really is getting your water project on an intended use plan at the state level. Who is controlling that intended use plan? How to get the project on the use plan can vary state by state. And if you need help identifying how, or want to be part of a conversation around advocacy around state revolving funds, I think the folks on this call can help connect y'all. There's a really great working group called the State Revolving Fund State Advocates Forum. And as you can see, these are pre-existing funding mechanisms, but a huge amount of money through the Infrastructure Act increase the amount of funding available. And then I wanted to name a couple of Inflation Reduction Act programs to be aware of. This is by no means comprehensive, but just some programs I thought might be of interest to folks. So this first one is actually run by HUD. It's called the Green and Resilient Retrofit Program, and it's specifically for affordable housing properties to improve energy or water efficiency. And it has a lot of money to do that through installation, investment in it, and also energy and water assessments. A lot of these programs I'm going to name, especially the ones that came out through the Inflation Reduction Act that are new, still don't have guidance out yet. So we are waiting on it, but I wanted to make sure folks knew the names of these and to be on the lookout if these are resources y'all are interested in. Two other programs I wanted to flag for y'all is the Environmental Protection Agency's Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And the reason why this fund I think is so important is because it is the biggest amount of money allocated in the Inflation Reduction Act, and it has the shortest timeline to be allocated by the federal government to recipients. It is $27 billion that can be used in grants or loans over 2 years. And the funding is actually supposed to become available, I believe, not just in the spring of 2023, but in February, they are supposed to launch the program. We are hoping a lot of public comment went into, was submitted last week. We are hoping that the program regulation and guidance becomes public within the next month. So we know that how communities can actually touch this money, which its main criteria is that it has to help support greenhouse gas reduction and zero emission projects. And that I think we can think of really expansively. And then another program that again doesn't have clear guidance right now, but that is coming up is a $3 billion program, I believe also through the Environmental Protection Agency. I'm sorry, I don't have the agency listed here and I can double check that, but it's specifically for community-based nonprofits and organizations to support community-led projects to address disproportionate environmental and public health harms related to pollution and climate change. Some funding not included in here that I just want to flag verbally is 2 rebate programs. They're called the Homes and the HER High Energy Efficiency Home Retrofit Programs. These programs are going to be administered by the state to create rebates or upfront discounts for people to buy energy efficiency or renewable energy materials, installations, and just general retrofit upgrades to their homes, including HVAC, heat pumps, home insulation, better electrical wiring to help increase energy efficiency and electrification of homes as well. So Emerald Cities has really been looking at the past 2 years with this huge investment and these supposed equity commitments from the federal government of what communities can be doing now to engage with that money. And so like folks have mentioned, we wrote a playbook. I threw the link in the chat about where is the money? How can communities begin thinking about the money? Who can they begin talking to? It's really rudimentary, and I'm thinking that because I think over half of y'all said you're already engaging with federal funding, you might know much more than what's in the playbook, but we really wanted to look at this opportunity as a way for community organizing to get more energy pumped into it and for us to be able to say communities are able to hold accountable this type of spending, and for nonprofits like Emerald Cities and others to help build capacity of communities to again engage and hold accountable that spending. We are also launching what are called community benefit plans as a way for communities to try to organize around holistic asks from infrastructure investments. A lot of infrastructure investments are siloed. You know, money is in the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. Some money is coming from the Department of Energy. Some money is coming from state money. And it's really hard to apply for different pots of money and to interact with government resources. And there's also a lot of risks involved, especially if you're a small organization or if you're a community who is saying, hey, this is not my full-time job. I'm just trying to, get lead-free pipes in my neighborhood, or to get just energy access and retrofits. And so we're trying to say to government, if communities are able to understand the benefits they want to see realized, that's what government then has to close the gap on, aggregate what types of resources can happen or can help meet these needs, and work with communities to realize these projects. And this is community benefit plans is not to be confused with something like a community benefit agreement or community workforce agreement, where a lot of times the benefits for communities are named by the project developer, local government, but not by communities themselves. So this is really trying to be a community-centered and community-driven tool, which part of the playbook goes into how to develop this. And there's also resources that we can help connect you to. I know I talked about a lot of things briefly, but if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at Emerald Cities. This is our general policy email that 2 of us monitor at Emerald Cities, and just also happy to answer any questions that come up today. And I will pass it back to you, Renee.
Thank you so much. We do have one more poll that we want to launch before I hand it over to Lubna. So Erin, can you launch our last poll, please? And there it is, you should see it. So this is about advocating for environmental justice policy and setting definitions of disproportionately impacted communities, or other terms for that, disadvantaged communities, which I think is what the EPA uses. So I'd like to hear from you on this one as well. Great. Thank you so much. We are almost halfway there. Take another maybe 30 seconds. Good. And if didn't get a chance, go ahead and get your answer in, and we will close the poll. Now, go ahead and close it. Thank you all so much. The 23% are doing this at the federal level, 20% at the state level, 22% at the local level, 14% we are aspiring to but haven't started the process yet, another 14% not involved in this work. 5% we don't know how or where to start the process, and 2% we are going to be doing it soon. So thank you so much for sharing your experience there. I'm going to hand it over to another one of our collaborative members. I'm so grateful for her being here today. Lubna, go ahead and take it away.
Awesome, thanks Renee. Great, so good afternoon everybody. My name is Lubna Ahmed. I am the Environmental Justice Boards Manager at the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. A little bit about me is that my background is in public health with a focus on environmental science and policy, and I've been working in the environmental justice space for about 10 years now. I'm on the Urban Waters Learning Network Equitable Development Collaborative, really just bringing the EJ perspective, especially for kind of the southwestern part of the country. And as we kind of just jump into this topic, I am calling in from Denver and, work for the state of Colorado. And I just want to acknowledge that what is now Colorado includes the land of the Ute, Arapaho, Cheyenne, Dene, Lakota, Apache, Pueblo nations, and many tribes, and that the sovereign tribal governments of the Ute, Mountain Ute, and the Southern Ute Indian tribes still reside in the state, And these tribes are the original stewards of these natural areas, and we must always honor and respect these original stewards of the environment and their relationship with the land. So with that, I wanted to provide a little bit of background. In Colorado, like other states, there's been historic policies such as redlining and practices like zoning, which have led both intentionally and unintentionally to racial and income segregation in housing. Industrial areas, highways, and other pollution sources were more likely to be located within or near low-income neighborhoods and communities of color. And many of these housing and land use patterns persist today. And so as a result, low-income communities and communities of color in Colorado continue to face greater environmental health risks. One exciting piece of legislation that passed in the summer of 2021 was the Environmental Justice Act, or in Colorado, we refer to it as House Bill 21-1266. And this basically established a state policy of reducing these environmental health disparities. And one of the things that the Environmental Justice Act, permitted the Colorado Department of Public Health to do was to create an environmental justice program. So we are a pretty small team. We're about 9 people right now. And one thing that's unique about the Department of Public Health and Environment in general is that we are one of the few states in the nation that has kind of both public health and environment combined into one agency. And with the passage of the EJ Act, we were able to develop this environmental justice program. And one of the major things, in addition to declaring environmental justice as a state policy, was that it created these 2 different board bodies, the Environmental Justice Action Task Force, as well as the Environmental Justice Advisory Board. And in addition to that, kind of all along the way, one of the things that the EJ Act also did is it's defining what disproportionately impacted communities are. So as the board's manager, which is my title, my job is to manage the Environmental Justice Action Task Force and the Environmental Justice Advisory, these 2 board bodies that were created by the EJ Act. And that's kind of the bulk of what I'm gonna share with you all today. I'm presenting this information so that hopefully, and we're really proud of the work that we're doing here in Colorado on the EJ front, and that, we can kind of lead by example, and would love to continue the conversation with you all to see how we can share resources and be just a helping hand for anybody that is really looking to advocate for EJ policy, whether it's at the state level or at the grassroots level. That's something that we've been working on a lot. So this is just a quick image of who is on the Environmental Justice Action Task Force. And just thought this would be a good visual. These are folks that really represent a wide variety of backgrounds and interests. You have people from across the state, different locations across the state, folks that are, grassroots community activists, all the way to people who are representing the oil and gas industry. And we've brought them together. There are 22 task force members to really develop a statewide environmental justice strategy and a plan to implement that strategy. So we actually just got done with this work. We submitted about 50 pages of environmental justice recommendations to the governor, the Colorado General Assembly, and to our very own Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. We just did that on November 14th. And this was really a huge feat considering the wide variety of topics that really fall under environmental justice. And just to kind of paint the picture of some of the things that are in that environmental justice report of recommendations, we focus on using an environmental equity and cumulative impact analyses at state agency level. So whenever an agency is taking any sort of action, we are suggesting that that we are looking at all actions through an environmental equity lens and really focusing on cumulative impacts, which often goes by the wayside. We have talked about bridging the gap between data and data sharing, really focusing on reducing environmental health disparities through data. As I mentioned earlier, and what was encouraged through the Environmental Justice Act, really defining what disproportionately impacted communities are and what that means. Because, setting a definition and kind of moving on from there and seeing who that is inclusive of is really an important first step. And then focusing on best practices for community engagement. When we are holding meetings and how accessible they are, focusing on language justice, focusing on Indigenous community engagement, how we are respecting the sovereignty of tribal governments and how they are interacting with entities like the state government. So these are all things that are in the Environmental Justice Action Task Force plan. And again, that I am sharing with you all because we do feel like it's a really excellent starting point and a model that can be kind of replicated hopefully by other states. And this is just the beginning. We just submitted this report, but we are now in the implementation phase and seeing how these recommendations can then be pushed into legislation, hopefully down the line. And I believe Erin is dropping a link to that report so that you all can take a look at it. Next, I wanted to talk about the Environmental Justice Advisory Board, the other board body which I manage, which is a little smaller. It's a 12-member board. Unlike the task force, this board will not be dissolved. They're here for many years to come, and what they are really doing is continuing to champion these policy recommendations that I was just talking about. We just launched a first of its kind statewide environmental justice grants program. We just launched that on November 21st. The applications are open and available until February 3rd. We are releasing about $1 million in funding throughout the state of Colorado for any communities that are fall within the definition of what is considered a disproportionately impacted community. So we're ensuring that the funding goes back to those communities. And representation matters. I think it's really important to point out that this advisory board is entirely made up of people of color. And many of them come from these very communities that we are trying to focus on that are been deeply affected by environmental injustices. So, that is mostly what I wanted to cover. I know that we're kind of running short on time, so I just will end there, but will say that, I'm here to kind of represent, again, the Urban Waters Learning Network. And I'm here because I want to emphasize the connection between environmental justice communities, including communities that have been historically marginalized due to a history of environmental racism and redlining, and really draw that connection to what we can do and are doing to ensure equitable development, that equitable development is a priority in all the work that we do, whether that's at the local nonprofit grassroots level, amongst government agencies, or even amongst corporations or for-profit groups. So it's really important for all of us to be fighting the good fight, and happy to continue the conversation.
Thank you so much. I am going to share my screen again. We have some time right now for some question and answer for all of the panelists together. This session is scheduled until 2:30, so I know some of you might have to drop at 2 o'clock, and if that's the case, we do have a link for an evaluation. And also, please join us on Mobilize, the Urban Waters Learning Network, where we'll share more resources, tools, and continue these conversations, as Lubna has just mentioned. I see some questions coming in through the chat. As part of the registration process, we also allowed you all to submit some questions, and so I wanted to start there with some of those questions. And my colleague Diana Toledo is going to help me field some of those questions here for the next maybe 10 minutes or so. And then we are going to transition into breakout rooms with each of the individual panelists, where you'll get to ask questions and share resources and share with one another in those breakout rooms as well. So one of the first questions that came in that I want to bring up is, what are the top 3 steps needed to make equitable development take place? And any of the panelists, feel free to go ahead and answer that question. I am going to stop my share so we can all see each other. I encourage you also to share more questions in the chat. We will be looking at those. And if you're comfortable, you can raise your hand and you can come off mute and ask a question yourself as well.
Renee, could you ask the question again?
Yes, absolutely. So what are the top 3 steps needed to make equitable development take place or a priority in communities?
I can, and Renee, just to clarify, you're looking to the panelists to just kind of talk through some of these questions and answers.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, great. So I'm happy to start. You know, I think from my perspective and in my opinion, everything starts with community. So like all, you know, when you're talking about top 3 steps, it's every single one of those steps should be originated with community. So I think, you know, community first, clearly identifying the problem or gap that exists in equitable development, you know, then moving on to community actually developing a sustainable solution to address that gap, you know, whether that's identifying resources that are needed in the community, you know, really focusing on capacity building, thinking about areas for collaboration, and then, you know, kind of moving on to like a 3rd step, you know, thinking about the implementation of the solution to address equitable development, and reflecting on lessons learned to ensure that that, you know, this change that the community is you know, identifying and addressing is sustainable, and that, you know, we can continue to perpetuate this positive change. So I think those are really, in my mind, like that's the clear path forward.
Just to add on to what Lubna said, like having community at the center is really important, and focusing on that relationship building every step of the way. And also talking with the community, trying to envision, okay, let's say this is a 3-year project or a 3-year engagement. What does our relationship look like after? And really building like strong, long-term trusting relationships. And the other thing I would say is, in my experience, when we get funding, we're typically working with different communities or different places across the state, and recognizing that it's not a one-size-fit-all model, and that communities like in the north of the state are going to be very different than the south of the state. And so really just letting the communities lead and asking questions, and then kind of altering your project or your idea a little bit so it's fitting the purpose of that specific area and community.
If I could also hop in, I want to name that we have a report embedded in the Justice 40 playbook about a community benefit agreement that was done. I think it was with the Portland Water Authority, so based in Oregon, Portland, Oregon, not Portland, Maine. And what was really incredible about this was it mandated a certain percentage of project spending had to fund a community oversight board. We see that also similarly with the Portland Clean Energy Fund, that there needs to be funding, resources, and structures to make sure that communities can equitably engage and manage implementation of some of these resources. And I think we're starting to see examples of that pop up at the local level. Sorry, go ahead. Oh, okay. Well, and then other places and opportunities with ARPA money, that's the American Rescue Plan Act, have also set up some community decision-making spaces, and just wanting to name that as like procedural equity is necessary to realize community benefits. Communities have to be defining what community benefits are.
Thank you all. I'll go ahead and pose another question that was sent to us ahead of time, and that is, are there cities that are on the front end naming anti-displacement as a concern or consideration as they discuss infrastructure investments and other investments? Are you familiar with communities that are thinking about this as they look for the funds that might come down on their community and potential harms of those?
Yeah, in Portland, like I talked about, the Coley TIF that they've been envisioning for at least 4 years, with having sidewalks updated, having a park in the area, things like that, updates just happening to the city of Portland. Anti-displacement was a big issue, and something that we're focusing on. And we use the tax increment financing district as a possible avenue for that, as well as in a lot of the projects that we do, we're trying to hire local contractors, bring in local businesses, and talk with them to avoid displacement.
Thank you, Cheyenne. And it looks like somebody in Nefertiti, would you be willing to come off mute and share what the city of Austin's doing?
Sure, I will. I do serve as the city's community displacement prevention officer. And I will say one of the reasons my position exists is because of the push from the community, right? In addition to that, what we're currently working on, we do have a transit investment, and it's approximately $7 billion. But with that transit investment, recognizing, I'm sorry, it says I'm getting a notice to start my video. I'm sorry. I guess it pops on automatically. But with that transit investment, recognizing that historically Black and Brown communities and people of color have been displaced as a result of transit infrastructure investments, there was a voter approved $300 million investment to address anti-displacement or displacement pressures as a result of the transit investment. So I like everything that you guys are talking about in terms of centering community. So that's what we have done to sort of establish the priorities around how those funds will be spent. And then also we just recently in September brought to council 14 recommendations for $20 million in funding based on proposals that came from nonprofit organizations. So this is really exciting. And I will say this was community driven, and this is how we have gotten here so far.
Thank you so much for offering that. I see also, it's great to hear all that's going on in Austin. Milwaukee, thank you, Brittany, for posting an anti-displacement plan. If any other folks have such links or examples from your community, please weigh in on the chat. We'd love to hear how many other communities are doing this work.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. This is about creating this community and doing this work and sharing with one another, and so I appreciate that. There are a couple questions in the chat that I would like to go to. One from Jane, and Jane, if you wanted to come off mute, you could go ahead and ask it, or I'm happy to do it for you.
Sure. Is
Okay.
that me, Jane?
Yes.
Great. So in dealing with these questions around equity and equitable development, at least where I am, there's been a big conversation about the tension between urgency and improving people's living conditions and addressing things like the climate crisis, and how to have equitable public processes that can sometimes take additional time. Do you have any advice or insights into that tension, if you think that it exists, and how it can be resolved? Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. Any of our panelists have a response to one of those?
I can give a stab at it. I run into this a lot of the time, and especially in 2020 and 2021. And things that we have been doing is talking to communities, and at first just like talking about them in their life and like what is like the highest priority, and trying to connect them to resources that are like, I just focus on water, but if they're having an energy or a food crisis, trying to connect them to the right organizations and right resources. And then on the other side, when we're working with agencies or other processes, a lot of the times I'm in the room just to slow things down, be like, hey, community isn't ready, or they have other things they need to focus on. We need to put a pause on this, so that you can get accurate engagement. So it's kind of sourcing resources and trying to connect people, and then slowing other agencies and people down simultaneously.
Yeah, I feel like that tension is brought up a lot, and it's like, it's very real. And I also like, this is a personal statement, like in my heart, believe that if we want true sustainable solutions, we have to build community capacity, because communities hold true sustainable solutions already. I have a previous boss who named this as cultural reparations. Like, we used to be in alignment and a part of an ecosystem with our planet and our resources. And that was greatly interrupted by colonialism, capitalism, extraction, white supremacy, and many other things that created profit over people models. So if we are trying to reverse that or recapture a healthy planet and healthy people, I think that putting people over profit means investing in people as infrastructure as well.
Thank you so much. I do want to note, it is 2 o'clock. I do want to shift gears to give you an opportunity to continue having these conversations, but maybe in some slightly smaller groups. So I will in a moment open up some breakout rooms for you, and you can self-select which room that you would like to join. And we will have some of our panelists, some River Network colleagues, and some of our collaborative members in these different breakout rooms as well. So I hope that you can have some really good discussions in those breakout rooms. If you do have to drop off, you can please fill out our evaluation and join us in our mobilized group for more resources and conversations such as this. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and start these breakout rooms, and we'll be in there for about 15 minutes, and we'll have time to come back together. I go ahead and open them. There are 3 rooms, and you can go ahead and self-select which one you would like to join. And for our panelists, I've tried to title them related to the talks that you've given. So if you could join those, that would be great.
Yeah. Just scroll to the bottom of that long list of names, and that's where you'll find the room.
Thank you, Dion. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I hope that you had some good discussions in your breakout rooms. We have some time left here. I have a couple of ways that I'd like to try to collect some feedback from your breakout room experience. We have another one of these boards in which you can share that way, or you can come off mute and share something that you learned, something that you would like to learn. Yeah, anybody want to come off mute? No, that's okay. We've been on almost for an hour and a half. How's everyone feeling? Rebecca. Yeah, thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just, I'm wondering if there's a way to share kind of like lessons learned, success stories, as we're all kind of in different places in this, if the playbook has a kind of a landing spot for that, or even almost like a Q&A, like if someone, like, hey, I have a question for the group, almost like not a chat board, but something where, this is a focused effort, right? Like it's not just, and we're doing this work in different parts of the country and different communities. So just a suggestion, or I don't know if that resource is already out there, but it might be helpful to kind of have that resource to share information, and also to learn information on how folks are working in different spaces.
Sonia dropped an answer to that, I think, in the chat. And also, the online communications platform that we have for the Urban Waters Learning Network, we also have one specifically for equitable development, where we would love to have continued conversations and sharing between communities and resources. So I dropped the link in the chat to the Urban Waters Learning Network Mobilize group. And from there, you should be able to see the subgroup that's equitable development, or actually, I have that. Let me grab it. Or Erin, you might have that too. And Sonia, I don't know if you wanted to come off mute and address that statement. You're more than welcome.
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant idea to create an interactive space, because I think that is really aligned with communities hold a lot of these solutions, and building visibility of how folks are addressing it on the ground, I think is a real people power solution. And then the link I just dropped in the chat is from the Chisholm Legacy Project. If folks have heard of ALEC, which is the kind of like neoconservative legislative monstrosity, I'll say that. We on the progressive side are also trying to build up capacity for model policies that we can have in our toolkit for folks to pull out. So if you have something you want to share, there's a public database linked there, and then there's also a portal to submit policies as well.
Does anybody else want to share? Via the chat, come off mute.
Yeah, I'll just say that, I think just having panels like this and having a collaborative like the one that we have is just, is really just the starting place. And, there's so much information sharing that can happen. Just in the few minutes that we had our breakout session, it's really clear that a lot of us are trying to do the same work, and rather than reinventing the wheel, just ensuring that we're sharing as many resources as possible. I'm dropping my email address in the chat for anybody that ever wants to kind of talk through anything that I shared, or if you feel that what the work that you're doing is really meaningful, and that is something that I can learn from. I just really encourage that. I think that again, myself focusing on environmental justice, I feel like this is the power lies in collaboration. And so just wanted to just thank everybody for joining the call, and really just having this exchange of resources, and just want to open the door to let people know that I'm always available as a resource.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just wanted to say thank you all for organizing this as well. I didn't know what to expect from joining this webinar, but it's very thoughtful and gracious to put together this resource of information, especially for community-based organizations doing work in partnership with so many, we have a lot of great engineers and planners and wetland ecologists, but connecting to our state policies and the resources that they have is where the challenge lies, and letting us know that the money is there. We have to figure out how to tap into these initiatives, because we do get excluded. It becomes another bureaucratic monster that we have to kind of jump in and know how to move forward in that space. So you all are giving us a feeling of hope around bringing, connecting to those systems. So I look forward to following up with you all. Thanks so much.
Thank you for your feedback. Anyone else? I'm happy to give everyone 5 minutes of their day back, but I'm also happy to hear from you if you'd like to speak. Okay, well, I just want to say thank you so much to our panelists. I have continuous gratitude for the members of our Equitable Development Collaborative and the members of our River Network and Groundwork USA team, the Urban Waters Learning Network. And I'm just really grateful for all of you who were here for the beginning of the call and who stayed on to the end of this call. This is the way we do the work. And like Lubna said, collaboratively and resource sharing. And so please join us at the Mobilized Communications Platform group. You can fill out the evaluation for this training on the link that should be dropped in the chat. You can also reach out. You can find me on the Urban Waters Learning Network website, the River Network website, rmazurek@rivernetwork.org. Happy to connect and continue to connect you all to each other. So with that, thank you so much. And we'll see you in the new year.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thanks.